Thank you everybody for tuning into this latest episode of Coffee with Bob. You can watch all Coffee with Bob episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search Hapanowitz and Associates on YouTube and you will find us on there. I am really excited to bring this episode to you today because I have a special guest with me, my fiance, Zach Simmonds.
Hey everyone.
And Zach is an insurance advisor at Eber and Associates. Eber and Associates is an independent insurance agency in and around Pittsburgh, right?
Yep.
So what do you focus on at Eber?
Yeah, so my main focus is commercial insurance in the Western Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia, Southern, Eastern Ohio region, and taking a look at helping business owners, find risk advisory solutions. So part of that though is doing a lot of personal lines work with, my clients from the commercial space, friends, family, things of that nature, and folks that need help in the Pittsburgh region with their home, their auto, and their life insurance.
And we're getting married this year. And we wanted to bring this topic to you guys because we've had recently some conversations around finances and budgeting and planning. And, after going through it myself, really for the first time, as a fiance, as someone who's going to be getting married very soon, it kind of makes you appreciate all the more the need to have this kind of conversation for anybody who's, engaged or newly married, or even if you're not getting married, but you're moving in together and committing to being one household together. There are some conversations that, from our experience are always helpful in having. And so we're going to talk about that today and kind of tell it from our own perspective as well. And we were talking about this earlier, but everybody grew up around money differently. And I'm not just talking about money in amounts. I'm talking about how, we think about money and the values around money.
Sure.
It's so important. So let's start with insurance. And it was kind of perfect that you specialize in insurance. I specialize in financial planning because those are, the two main things that a couple should be talking about, especially as they become one. So as newlyweds or as, as an engaged couple or as a couple that is going to be moving in together and, basically becoming one household, what would you say from your experience are the main factors within the insurance realm that, couples should be looking at?
Yeah, so I think starting with some basics, the insurance that everybody knows is your home and auto. So the two basics there of the things that the two most expensive things that we're probably gonna buy and own in our life are also the two biggest liabilities in our life. So excluding any business owners out there. So when you take a look at home and auto, and two people come together, like Christina said, whether that's engagement, marriage, or you're just moving in together. You need to take a look at what the other person might be used to. So a lot of phone calls and a lot of first-time home buyers that I deal with are having the conversation with me for the first time about a new home that they're buying. But they're also having the conversation for the first time with their significant other about what they want from a protection standpoint. So a lot of those phone calls that I go through, we're kind of working things out, the three of us, when there could be an opportunity to maybe have that discussion before you reach out to your insurance agent or insurance provider to say, how did you grow up? What were you used to? What kind of strategies do you use for your auto coverage? Are you looking to save the most money, or are you and your family used to maybe providing the most amount of protection? So those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. And two very different conversations from a financial standpoint about what you're going to pay for and what you're going to get.
Yeah, for sure. And even, you reviewed what my home and auto coverage was. And I thought I had, I had pretty good coverage, but there are nuances to different, different options that you have, whether you go with one company or another. So it was very eye-opening to, go through that sort of review. And, now that, we are taking that next step to review that together, it's just on an even different level and a different mindset, because it's not just about me anymore. It's about, both of us as we move forward. So, okay, we talked about home and auto, and then any other, I know you wanted to talk about a couple other, things to consider.
Yeah, home and auto are the big two. Taking a look at either property you're going to buy, or another scenario I see a lot is one of the individuals in the relationship already own a piece of property, and that other individual is going to go from renting to maybe moving into a piece of property that's owned. So discussing how that insurance is going to be taken care of. If they do move into that home, there's some things from the state's perspective that they want to see. If that becomes your official address, you can't be, and that's on your license, you can't be under mom and dad's auto policy anymore. Your auto has to match what your driver's license says, and that insurance policy needs to match accordingly. So, when you move in together, you kind of combine your auto as well. It's just the nature of the beast. So, again, having that conversation on how do we want to do this, what works best for us, what are you used to from a coverage standpoint, and also what do we have? So what are the things that we have in our life? Everybody's lives are different. You have different responsibilities, different assets. What do we have that we need to protect? That's what insurance is there for. I think a lot of people think their insurance is for the fender bender on the road. While that may be true, and it can fix your car at the local garage, insurance is there for your worst day. So my house burned down, my car was totaled, God forbid somebody was killed. What does the insurance need to be to protect me? But also you have to protect the other person now when you're getting into that conversation. So that's, I would say, the main two. And then life insurance is kind of another sidebar.
Yeah. So talk to us about life.
Yeah.
And, what goes into those considerations.
So your life insurance, we use an acronym called LIFE, LIFE. So you take a look at your loans, your income, your funeral expenses, and your education expenses. And for someone that is getting married and, starting to talk about a future with that person, about maybe having kids, that's what the last E is for. It's not for your education that you already have. Well, it can be. It's for the future cost of education for children.
Sure.
So,
and it doesn't mean that you have to go with that specific amount, when you add up the amounts from that acronym, but it's a good starting point, right?
Yeah. So you look at loans. All right, what debt do I have? So we're going to have a mortgage. We're going to have a couple autos, maybe. We're going to have some credit card debt in there. We're going to have some student loans. So what's that L number look like? Income. So you take a look at your income. If one of us were to disappear, how do I replace that person's income for the foreseeable future to the point where I hit retirement or even beyond? So depending on what age you are, that income number could be a pretty high annual amount over time. That can become a big number. And then funeral expenses are pretty standard across the board. I would say $10,000 and up is pretty standard. And then the education at the end. So looking at the cost of education, which, if you know from your student loans, the first bucket, it's not going to get any cheaper moving forward. So looking at what do we need to have set aside for our kids and education. And there's creative ways that you can, put some riders and things like that on life insurance to help the expense out like that.
And okay, so that's life. And before we were talking about insurance for business owners, and I know that that's probably not the first thing that couples think about when they're going through these planning talks with their soon-to-be spouse. But for a couple where one or both in that relationship own a business, then that kind of coverage is really an integral part of, updating and reviewing the plan. So, talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
I think it's a valid point. You have two entrepreneurs that are coming together that own their own business. That's an extra level of liability that is exposed in their daily life. So you need to be thinking and planning about what does that exposure do to the other person. A lot of people are okay with putting their head down at night, with a certain level of coverage or understanding about what their risk profile might look like. But that other person might have no idea, especially if they're one entrepreneur and the other person isn't, what that risk profile and exposure looks like. Right. So letting the other person understand, look, this is this is what could happen in this business. This is what my worst day would look like in this business. And here are the steps I have taken to build a wall between our personal life and the assets we have and the business that I own. So that's not just insurance. That's probably a conversation with a wealth management advisor and an attorney and different things like that.
Absolutely. But it all plays together.
Sure.
It really all plays together. So yeah, that's such a good point. All of this stuff, you know, use all of your advisors available to you, use all of the resources available to you. And going off of that, that's the perfect segue into the next part of the conversation that I wanted to have with you, which is more along the lines of the financial planning side of things, the budgeting side of things, cash flow management, which is my, realm. And, you know, what I'm experienced in. And I will say, when we went through our conversation, it was a huge wake up call for me. And I'm in this industry and I'm the one, you know, encouraging people to have this conversation. And I thought I was prepared for it, and I was, but it was just such a huge wake up call, because it's no longer just about me when I'm thinking about my month to month spending, or, you know, year to year spending. Now it's about us and the goals that we have set forth together. And so what we did and what worked for us doesn't mean that every couple should be doing this, but we laid out our long-term goals, financial goals, in terms of what we'd like to have saved up, what maybe our next home purchase, you know, what neighborhood do we really see ourselves living in? So we have to work towards those things. Those are our long-term goals. Okay, well, from there, what are our intermittent goals, and then our shorter term goals. And with those goals, you can build a game plan to work towards them. And one of the biggest game plans is the budget. And,
absolutely,
you know, you have to be able and willing to adjust what your habits are, you know, after however many years we've been on this earth, all of us have formed habits, and spending habits are a huge part of that. So for me, I'm unwinding certain habits, and, you know, so are you, and we're building new habits together that help us work towards those goals. And honestly, if that's the only reason, you know, to have this conversation with your soon to be spouse or your new spouse or your significant other that you will, you know, be moving in with.
Even if you just started dating, just to understand.
That might be a buzzkill, but at some point, when you feel like I have a future with this person, it's not the most romantic conversation to have, but it's definitely a good conversation to have for sure.
I think it's coming from a place of what I meant is just understanding someone's habits. So you don't go in understanding and trying to change. You just go into the conversation just to understand.
Absolutely.
And get an idea for, okay, if this person thinks this way about it, there should be no strategy to change how that person thinks, but it shouldn't be a shock either to understand what and how that person thinks about their protection or finances or things like that, because eventually the conversation is going to be forced. And I go back to that comment I made earlier about, you know, couples will call me about, hey, we're buying a new home. We're so excited. You know, okay, so what are you guys both used to from a financial standpoint and a protection standpoint? That's funny. We've never talked about that.
Yes, and exactly. And I think the last thing we all want to do is be in a position where we're making those very important decisions or going through a really important event like buying a home and not going about it from the same foundation financially or otherwise. So that's a really good point though, for sure. And communication is just so important. So budget is a great place to start, but don't forget to, it's important to be honest about your debt. And that was something that you mentioned when you were talking about life insurance, but even from a cash flow standpoint, it's really important to, at some point or another, you know, you're going to have to be upfront with the amount and types of debt that you have, estate planning, update your wills. If you want your spouse to be the person to, inherit, whatever wealth you have, then, update your wills, your powers of attorney, financial and healthcare powers of attorney, usually when, you get married, you want your spouse to be that decision maker if you're not able to make the decision on your own, health or otherwise. Check the beneficiaries on your retirement accounts. Look at that 401k, look at the beneficiaries on your life insurance policies.
Yeah.
It's really important. It's honestly going through this process and going through a union. It's just such a great opportunity to review everything that, you've been doing when it comes to finance, insurance, your estate plan, your long-term budgeting and goals. It's such a great opportunity to do it. And now you're doing it with someone who is your sounding board, and someone who can kind of hold you accountable too, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So, and I think that brings us to, the last part of our conversation, which is how do you actually implement, the conversations that you have? And to be honest, and we were talking about this, it's going to be different from one couple to another. There's no right or wrong answer. It's not a black and white answer that, we can give you. But the first step is having that conversation. From experience, some clients of mine, they pay for their own expenses from their own accounts. And it's just two completely different, checking accounts and everything like that. Some clients, pay for most of the expenses from, through one spouse. And then some of my couples, just one spouse pays for, all of it, or it's coming from one account and they merge all of their cash flow together. So, there's a bunch of options in between those three main options, but have that conversation. And I think for us, we did have that conversation and we're, trying to figure out, do we want one checking account or do we keep separate accounts, or is it both? Have those conversations with your spouse, with your significant other. And we're having that conversation now, but a year down the road, that game plan might change in terms of what works best for us. So it's important to stay, flexible.
Yeah, and I think that you just hit the nail on the head. All of this is a fluid, changing, moving, kind of living creature, if you will,
Right.
in your relationship. And the basis of it is just having that communication. We're both still very green, and our conversations will change over time based on the objectives we want to hit or the things that we see and experience in our life. But we're practicing and applying that aspect of communication. So yeah. Neither of us are big surprise people, so we're not going to have any surprises as long as that communication stays open. And you see it a lot where there are different there's different ways to avoid these conversations because they're not the most fun. It's not
romantic.
It's not romantic, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
And it makes things easier down the road when everybody's kind of operating on the left hand's talking to the right hand.
Yeah. So. Communicating also on values, not just on numbers, but on values as well. And we do all form values around money over time. So it's really important to take that time out and, make it a date night or a Sunday conversation over our morning coffee or something like that. Whatever works for you, just keep that communication going. That's really, if there's one thing to take away from that, I think that would be it for sure.
Absolutely.
So thank you everybody for watching. And like I said, you can check out all of our episodes of Coffee with Bob on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more content coming your way, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.